All right. So, why is sex in Christianity so confusing? Why is sex in our world so confusing? Why do people suffer through so many just identity crisis, not knowing what type of sexual nature that they have? Is it something you're born with? Is it something you choose? We're going to try to tackle this morning. My name is Brandon Fogel. Let's dive into this. I'm going to look at actually a couple clips from a video that Alex O'Connor had, and I don't even want to try to pronounce the guy's name that he sat down with, but it was something MacCulloch, but he didn't say his name in the video, his first name, but so I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. But we're going to take a look at it. In this first clip, we're going to look at that they dive into just the nature of Christianity at when Christ was on earth and the apostles, and there's this transformation of, did they have to change their mindset because Jesus was not returning as quickly as they thought? And was this just apocalyptic systems of thought that were happening and that were prevailing, and they had to just adjust? And then the guy, Mr. MacCulloch, he says something and then Alex just nods along of, oh, there's some writings that aren't really of Paul that are in the New Testament. And this really caught me off guard. I didn't really catch me off guard, but it caught me like, why do people just assume this? All right, let's take a look at the clip first of all.
Do you think that the original irrelevance of childbirth and procreation in the time of Paul might have had something to do with a sense of apocalypticism? In the early church, it's often thought by historians that, historically speaking, the people involved, Jesus himself and maybe Paul with him, believed that the world was about to end. They thought
absolutely.
It was oncoming, and that might explain why childbirth doesn't really show up as an important issue in the way that it would do in Judaism.
You're absolutely right, and I think that that's also the case with Jesus, that the message in the Gospels, filtered through the later writers, is of an apocalyptic faith. There's only going to be one generation of Christians. Christ will come back, and that's the mood in authentic Paul, the authentic letters of Paul in the New Testament. But then you get the next layer up, or onwards. For instance, the so-called pastoral epistles, the 2 epistles to Timothy and 1 to Titus, pretending to be by Paul. Now there, you're already getting the feeling of generations. And there you get pseudo-Paul saying, one of the purposes of marriage is children. The main purpose of marriage is children, particularly for the woman. So, straight away, once it became painfully clear that the end time was going to be postponed, you've got to think about history. You've got to think about the generations.
Okay, so that right there, now I know they're talking about primarily about, it seems early on that Paul is like, I wish that all people were as I am. If you got to marry, but there is a sense that there is this looming anticipation of Jesus's return, or something else is going on. There might have been that. And I want to say this quickly, that whether Jesus says in Revelation, I am coming soon. I'm coming soon. I get that, and that has been one of the strongest things that have been tough for me, that there seems this anticipation that Jesus was going to return within that generation, and he doesn't. But either way, it applies across all boards. Jesus's return is soon, in a sense, for everyone personally, because we're not promised tomorrow. Now, he didn't return in 2,000 years, but he even spoke about that in his life. He said, if I delay my coming, that's what it is, and either way, you be ready. But in what he's talking about right here, Paul, when he says, I wish that everybody was as I am, and if you got to marry, there was something crazy happening in that specific time. There was a heavy persecution that was about to unfold, and the temple was destroyed within that decade. So Paul dies in the 60s, around 67 AD or something like that, and the temple in Jerusalem is destroyed. There's wars happening. So there is high, intense pressure happening. It might not be the best thing to bring children into the world in that particular time in history. So I think that is what's going on in that sense. But did they have to shift their whole mindset because his delay was actually happening? He was not really returning, so they had to shift it. And then Mr. MacCulloch, he says, well, we know that these other writings are not of Paul, of 1st and 2nd Timothy and Titus. And I've looked into this, and the arguments that people bring, and these are just arguments. I would say the reality is they don't want to accept some of the things that are said in those books. But the arguments that are brought forward are usually this person who writes 2nd and 1st Timothy and Titus. It's a different style. It's different vocabulary. It's different just writing structure. So this can't be Paul. You got to keep in mind, Paul is not physically writing most of his letters. He is signing off on them. And a lot of his letters are just him speaking, and there is a person writing them down. Just like in 1 Peter, it does not look like this is the work of a fisherman who wrote this. You know how he uses, and 1st and 2nd Peter, there's a strong difference between because it's a lot more eloquent, and then 2nd Peter's more crass, and it seems different writing style. The people at the end of the books of the Bible, they usually write, I'm the one writing this through the pen of Silas, or I, Tertius, am writing this. He gives a little shout out, hey, I'm the one writing what Paul wrote. So these aren't the actual physical apostles, not always, that are writing these things. So that's something to keep in mind. I just think of, like, a lot of times people don't want to accept certain things of the Bible. So this one's like in 1st and 2nd Timothy, oh, this is Paul being a chauvinist, so this can't really be Paul. I only want to accept certain things that align more with what I think. I think that's what's going on. I might, because I don't have the same vocabulary a week ago than I probably have now. You grow, and like the time periods that Paul was writing in 1 Corinthians and Romans, all that, it's not the exact same time of his life. He's an older man. He's an older gentleman. He might have been using different words, and he's not the one physically writing them. So just to discount and say, oh, Paul didn't write those, I had to touch on that because that stood out to me pretty strong. All right, so, and then I'm going to skip over to this other passage that they discuss. And because they got into a lot of stuff about homosexuality, and they went into that in a lot of ways in like, what does that mean? Is our vernacular of what we're saying about homosexuality and same-sex marriage, is that applicable with what the Bible is saying in a lot of those contexts? There's a lot there, and I would say a straightforward reading of it, there's things going on in those contexts of what is specifically being talked about, but it doesn't really change the fact of how God has made people, and which is, it's tough. We kind of somewhat understand that we're going against nature, if God has made man and woman, and, and then a woman and a woman be together and a man be together, it seems contrary to nature. I would say that, and I'm going to be, because I want to be as open and honest with you as possible, and share my struggles, I have struggled with homosexuality myself, so, and there's a lot of Christians that have, not everybody just broadcasted everything everywhere, but like, it's not that I would say that people out there, they're doing like, oh, they're so evil when they're doing that, because how could I ever say that, when I've struggled with the same things? Everybody has their issues. And no one is better than anyone else. It's not to say, you could say certain sins are worse than others. Like murder is worse than anger, but in God's eyes, when you've had anger towards someone, you've murdered them in your heart. But there is still a sense of it's worse if you actually carry it out. And I'm always just hesitant because a lot of times I think how just the gap that is between us and God is it like There's not even a word besides the word infinite that describes it. So however much better you might think that you are compared to someone else, say you're not doing that, but you still got certain things, and just there might be minute differences between us on this playing field that we're on, but compared to us and God, it's like he is so much beyond us that it's not even close. And no matter if we think we're being good compared to someone else, on God's level, we are all in the same. It's microscopic, and that is even doing injustice to the word. It's so small when he looks at all of us, you know? And we are all, I got to be careful with saying this. We are all his children in a sense. We are all, there's this, God made all of humanity, we are all in a sense his children, we won't fully be his child and be able to spend eternity with him until we embrace Christ. But in a sense, we are all the offspring of God. All right, I want to skip to this other passage, because them talking about homosexuality, they brought up you could say the episode of, in the Old Testament, Jonathan and David, and it seems like that they have this relationship, but I think they're stretching it way too far, and they're just assuming things that really aren't there. Let's take a look at just them talking about and the words that they use and what they pull from it.
Probably is even possible. They're talking essentially about a particular kind of sex act.
Yeah, but of course you do get it in the Hebrew scripture, classically in the story of David and Jonathan.
Yes.
Which is coming out of the same era as Achilles and Patroclus.
Yes.
These are heroic figures of equal status, and it's remarkable that this story survived in the Hebrew scripture. The passage has lots of linguistic peculiarities, which I think indicates that even then some commentators were embarrassed by it. And that goes into the Syriac version, the Peshitta, as well. And the climax of the particular Jonathan and David story is that they embrace each other and cry. And then, as the King James version puts it, David exceeded. What can this mean? Well, it's very obvious what it means. And you see ancient scriptural commentators wrestling with this.
Yeah.
And then Jerome, of course, has to deal with it, doesn't like sex. And he says, David wept the more. And it's interesting now, looking at evangelical English translation, that they plump for Latin Jerome, who translated the church's scripture into Latin, the vulgar.
Okay. So right there are things in the Bible, like if you go back to the book of Ruth, I'm jumping over there. There's a words play that Ruth uncovers the feet of Boaz, and whether that word regal or whatever that word, it might mean innuendo for something else. I would not say that, but there are people that go about that route and say that there actually is different things that are being said in the Bible, and it's just under the surface. Just what startles me about this passage and them talking about Jonathan and David is they're reading so much into it, and just the contrast between that and accepting other parts of the Bible that are clear cut, clear as day. It's I guess it shows you the lens that we have unless God opens our eyes. We have a particular, it's hard to come to the Bible with fresh eyes because you already bring so much bias to the Bible just based on your life, what you've gone through, and the particular circumstance that you're in. And it seems like they are just reading into the Bible something that is there. He exceeded. Does that mean, is that sexual innuendo of what happened between Jonathan and David? I don't think so. I don't think that it was going on, but I mean, David was not perfect, and no Christian is perfect. And I know you couldn't say David was a Christian. Christ hadn't come yet, but in a sense he was Christian a little bit, he was looking forward. He is the father, the great-great-grandfather of Christ. But just them reading into this, he exceeded. So that means they were having some type of homosexual relationship. that just, it's very startling to me, like that they would jump to that and then in other contexts, other parts of the Bible, they're just going to maybe skate over, you know. I guess everybody comes at with a lens who just come at the Bible, every passage. It's fun to read into the Bible because there is probably things happening, you know. He might have been having something, but that doesn't make certain things right, you know. With David and Jonathan, I don't think he was, but I'll leave it for you to decide what you think. Put in the comments what you interpret that is about. Are you just assuming what Alex and Mr. MacCulloch are assuming? So if you've enjoyed this video and you want to continue this conversation, hit this link right here and I'll see you on the other side. Actually, it might be over here. We'll put it there.
I could see the cracks form in the paint, growing like a fire. What do I say? Can you see them? Can you see